Today, we have the unholy trinity of people I never want to hear from. We've got intelligent design creationist Stephen Meyer, we've got political weirdo Piers Morgan, and we've got Daily Dose of Wisdom for a video called Scientist Exposes Limitations of Atheism. 3 evidences for God. So let's watch this video and see just how frustrated we can get.
This all blew up last week as Tucker Carlson went on Joe Rogan. And I don't know if you saw this, but he said this about this very issue.
Oh, Lord, it just keeps getting worse and worse.
Take a look.
If evolution is real, and if there is this constant, I don't know, but it's visible. Like, you can measure it in certain animals.
You can measure adaptation.
Yeah.
But there's no...
Okay, I've already covered this video, but I may as well just go for it anyway. Adaptation is evolution. There is no difference between these two things. When you say species adapt, you are describing evolution.
No evidence that in fact, I think we've kind of given up on the idea of evolution. The theory of evolution as articulated by Darwin is like kind of not true. Right?
And what?
Well, sort of, but not really. I mean, yes, there is 150 years of science after Darwin, so he's not evolution Jesus. It has progressed, but the theory of evolution, as it stands, explains the fact of evolution. Evolution happens; it's a fact. It's just that the theory of evolution has changed since Darwin's time because it's science. It doesn't stand still; it changes as we learn more about the subject.
In what sense?
Well, in the most basic sense, the idea that, all life emerged from a single cell organism and over time, and there would be a fossil record of that, and there's not.
There is a fossil record of that, and better yet, we have DNA linking all life on Earth. Tucker Carlson, I don't know if he actually believes that. I'm inclined to think he doesn't. I don't think he's that stupid. But you never know, so who knows? But here's Pierce. Let's hope they actually get to Stephen Meyer, because let's just begin this nightmare.
Your response?
Well, I don't know what Tucker knows about all this, but...
Yeah, it's such a cop-out, man. That's such a cop-out. Like, it's obvious Tucker Carlson is just full of it. He's just wrong. It's obvious. Like, just say it. Just say it.
Probably not as qualified as you, but he likes to.
Maybe we start with something that happened here in London a few years ago, 2000.
Yeah, I would think that they're probably about equally qualified. Honestly, this guy dedicates his whole life to creationism. That's maybe even less qualified than Tucker.
2016, a major conference convened by the Royal Society, arguably the world's most august and prestigious scientific body, was convened by a group of evolutionary biologists who are dissatisfied with the standard neo-Darwinian theory of evolution. And many of the conveners are calling for a new theory because the primary mechanism of biological change articulated by Darwin and his subsequent followers, now called the neo-Darwinists, the idea of natural selection acting on random mutations and variations, is now understood to lack the creative power to generate major changes in the history of life.
And
I don't know if he's like lying here, or actually I do know he is lying here. Like that Royal Society thing, didn't one of his colleagues go to that and just stay quiet like the entire time? A group of evolutionary biologists getting together and saying our current evolutionary theory does not yet account for all the features we see in nature does not mean, okay, now we can put God in the mix. That means we need new explanations. Of course, Stephen Meyer and people like him, they lie. They lie for a living. They lie about other people all the time. They lie about the science because they are religious. The intelligent design is creationism. It's not science. They are promoting a creationist Christian view, essentially. So he's wrong in what he's implying. Now, what he's saying may be true, that yes, the theory of evolution as it stands is not perfect. We would never expect it to be so, but I think the problems here are significantly overstated.
Is at the crux of this debate, is it, as Tucker was getting at there, is it that if you actually start from where Darwin's theory...
The only debate is between religious people who say evolution isn't true because Jesus, and scientists who study science. So it's not really that much of a debate. It's just scientists say, well, we have this mechanism to explain this thing, and Christians going, well, no, you don't. That's not much of a debate, but that's what it is.
It begins the creation of the human being was so complicated. The body, the way we exist is so complicated. It doesn't make any rational sense.
There's two issues, really. There's how do you get to the first life from the simpler non-living chemicals? That's sometimes called chemical evolutionary theory, and that's a complete mess. It's in a state of impasse, and almost everyone, even your recent guest Richard Dawkins, acknowledges we have no chemical evolutionary theory that accounts for the origin of the first life.
Okay, so he's lying again. I feel like Professor Dave a little bit here, because I know this is a lie, and when you hear just such blatant, obvious lies being told like this, what can you really say except that's a lie? Origin of life research has actually made enormous strides over the years. The problem is that life had in the universe billions of years to happen. Humans have been studying the origin of life in laboratory settings for, what, a couple hundred years? That's not enough time. There aren't a whole lot of scientists dedicated to origins of life sort of research. But, like, you know, nature has an enormous head start. You wouldn't expect to find it overnight. It's like the artificial intelligence problem. Is it possible to create artificial intelligence that is truly, like, human-like? Can you do that? Well, I used to think maybe not, but now I'm starting to think the answer is maybe so. The simple fact is, we don't know. We haven't been working on computing long enough to have gotten there yet. Nature, again, had billions of years to work on this. Humans have not. That's what it comes down to. Do we know the exact specifics of how the first life forms emerged? Well, no, we don't have that. Does that mean we will never have that? Well, no, we're working on it. And he knows this, and he knows that we are making progress in this field. And eventually, I have no doubt that humans will create new life from these processes we think that life emerged from on Earth. When we do that, what will they focus on next? What will their next excuse be? Because there's always a next excuse.
And many people don't know that Darwin didn't attempt to explain the origin of the first life. Rather, he presumed one or very few simple organisms, which we now know were not simple, and then proposed a mechanism by which you could generate all the new forms of life we see on the planet today.
So this is the point.
I don't know what he means, like, the first life forms would not have been simple. I think what he's doing is conflating certain kinds of, like, life forms today, single-celled organisms, that are more complicated than they would have been when the first life emerged, comparing that to the first emergence of life. And it should be pretty obvious why that's a convenient little sleight of hand for our friend Stephen Meyer here. But again, just lying. That's all he's doing. He's literally just, like, lying and misleading people, like, deliberately. And of course, Daily Dose here is about to cut in with his fantastic, wonderful walrus stash. I guess we'd call that half walrus stash. It's not quite that majestic. He's about to cut in and no doubt say something that's going to make this whole thing even dumber.
Point that Dr. Meyer is making is that the thing that kids are taught in school of primordial soup leading to modern man is mythology. It's literally mythology. It has not been supported with scientific evidence. Darwin never touched on the origin of life.
Darwin is not evolution Jesus. I hate to have to say this so many times, but Darwin is not the be-all, end-all of evolution. He's not evolution Jesus. He is the starting point, not the ending point. There is no ending point. Hell, he's not even really the starting point. People had ideas of evolution before Darwin did. I mean, Mendel came first, didn't he? Erasmus Darwin, Darwin's own grandfather, had an idea of evolution. These aren't, like, new ideas. I mean, you can go back to the ancient world, and the ancient Greeks had ideas similar to evolution, but not quite exactly that. And yeah, so what he's calling the primordial soup model taught in schools, insofar as anything like that is taught about in schools, it's the best educated guess we've got for how this stuff happened. I don't know if this is taught in schools. I mean, in Kentucky it sure wasn't. I don't know about, like, elsewhere. I don't know about where this guy lives or whatever. Tell me in the comments. Did you learn about origin of life stuff in your basic classes or whatever? I think that's a thing that most people probably wouldn't learn a lot about until, like, college classes probably, or maybe even AP. But, like, The point I'm getting at here is simple. Um, just because something is currently not known to a T doesn't mean it's mythology. Now, we know life emerged somehow, and we don't see the hand of God in that process. We don't see any evidence whatsoever for this intelligent designer. What we do see is the elements that make up life are common throughout the cosmos. Certain ones more common here on Earth than on like other planets and such, but it's all there. It's all there. And so when you see the fact that all of these things exist, it makes logical sense that those things could combine in some way or another to become living. The difference between living and non-living at the level of like a self-replicating single-celled organism is not like it's not that enormous of a difference, I don't think. I mean, viruses, for example, have been described as sort of alive, semi-alive, not really alive per se, but close to it. Bacteria are alive, and viruses would be probably a pretty good analogy for, or not analogy, but pretty good example of like how the earliest life forms emerged, right? I mean, RNA and stuff. Of course, RNA plays other roles, but the point I'm getting at here is just that we see the stuff needed to make life all throughout the cosmos. It stands to reason that that stuff could self-assemble into a life form. What's stopping it from doing that exactly? So that's not mythology. It's a logical inference based on the universe around us.
No scientist has explained how life came about from non-life. It's a huge black hole in the scientific.
And we will. And once we do, what are you going to say then? That, oh, well, this proves it. Intelligent design had to be a thing. It took humans to create life, right? That's what they're going to say, right?
Community. And in fact, as Dr. James Tour has pointed out, the goalposts are moving farther away as scientists study this more. So, okay, now Dr. Meyer.
James Tour is a liar and a fraud. Now, you know, you can look at Professor Dave's videos for ample evidence of that. He's a liar. These people lie for a living. They lie for Jesus constantly. By listening to people like Tor, Meyer, Behe, so on, you, Daily Dose, are not educating yourself. You are miseducating yourself. You're uneducating yourself. You'd be better off if you had no idea what evolution was at all than to learn about it from these people.
Is going to get into, in addition to the origin of life problem, some of the problems with so-called macroevolution.
But even that now is being challenged because the main mechanism of evolutionary change does a nice job of explaining small-scale variation. What Tucker was referring to, I think, is adaptation. This would be examples like Darwin's finches, where the beaks get a little bigger, a little smaller in response to varying weather.
Oh, God. Every time. Microevolution and macroevolution, you have enough changes over time, and that leads to a big change. Like, I've heard it explained like this. Microevolution is an inch. Macroevolution is a foot. You get enough changes over a very long period of time, you have macroevolution. It is a complete joke for any person who remotely understands science to say that macroevolution has not happened when we have evidence of it. The fact that certain species are so close together that they can mate and have offspring, and yet those offspring are infertile, that alone is all the evidence you need to prove speciation happens, to prove that enough microevolution and you get macroevolution. Speciation is the big difference between micro and macroevolution, and you can prove speciation in those specific cases.
Other patterns, but it does a very poor job of
Hell, we've shown speciation in labs before, in laboratory settings.
Explaining the major innovations in the history of life, such as the origin of birds or mammals or animals in the first place. And
also, why are these intelligent design creationist Bible-believing weirdos suddenly getting so much media attention again? Are they shooting their shot a second time? Y'all lost in Pennsylvania, and if you try it again, you'll lose again. Kitzmiller versus Dover, you lost. Big time. If you try it again, you'll lose again. You're not going to convince people of your idea by going on Piers Morgan Uncensored, except for maybe the type of people who are already watching Piers Morgan Uncensored, namely fundamentalist Christian conservatives. That's who's going to be watching Piers Morgan. I don't see any reason why a liberal atheist would be watching. So you're going to take people who already believe in Jesus and make them think they've got intellectual backing for the idea of Jesus coming down and creating the sharks or whatever, you know. But you're not really, I mean, these people, I don't know why they're doing it. I don't know. First of all, again, I don't know why they're back in the mainstream. Like, you've got this guy on Piers Morgan. I think he also appeared on Rogan there. Other people like him have appeared on similar shows. Why? Why are these people suddenly back? I would assume that somebody is funding this. I would assume somebody has started giving them a lot of money. And with these money, they've made connections. And with these connections, they've bribed their way back into the media. I don't imagine that interest in intelligent design, creationism, has suddenly surged. I don't imagine that's the case. So this is definitely like artificial, right? The question is, how is it happening? That I would like an answer to.
There in the fossil record, we do see very abrupt, many instances of very abrupt appearance without the transitional intermediates that you'd expect on the basis of the Darwinian picture of the tree of life.
Fossilization is a rare process. Some species, probably a great deal, probably most of them, are going to be lost to the ravages of time. But the thing is, we have enough transitions between species in the fossil record that we know it happens. Now, there are ideas like punctuated equilibrium, Stephen Jay Gould, which are intended to explain the appearance of like sudden changes in the fossil record. I mean, it stands to reason that there would be times when the evolutionary arms race could speed up, like after a mass extinction event, like an asteroid hitting or a gamma ray burst or the first emergence of predators. One could easily see how that would spur a very rapid, sudden, quick evolution. I don't see why that would be a problem, but of course, these guys have to pick out little individual spots where they can put Jesus. They have to do it.
So
And they have to deny they're doing it.
your belief that the Darwin theory actually fails then?
I think it does fail. I think it captures an element of the truth. There's the small-scale microevolutionary variation is certainly a real process, and no one.
If you accept microevolution, you accept all of it. That's how it works. You can't just say the species change and adapt to their environments, but it stops arbitrarily where I decide it does. You can't do that. To accept one is to accept the other. I don't make the rules. Sorry.
Disputes that. Natural selection is a real process, but what's at issue now is the degree to which it has genuine creative power. And I think at this 2016 conference, the opening talk was given by a prominent Austrian.
That may not have been the one where his colleague showed up and was silent the whole time, but there was a similar gathering like that where his colleague showed up, probably intending to spread his ideas and just like was quiet while real scientists did real science. If you want to find out more about these people and why they suck so much, why they're lying so much, the lies they tell specifically, Professor Dave has a great set of videos on he's probably done like 20 videos on these people now, just tearing all their arguments apart in ways that I can't because I am not as scientifically informed as Professor Dave. So if you want to know more about why these people suck specifically, go over there and watch those videos. But there are a lot of them. You'll probably be wasting. That's not a waste. You'll probably be. I mean, it's a waste in the sense that like nobody should have to sit through 40 hours of Stephen Meyer, Michael Behe, and James Torr being wrong. It's a waste in that sense. But learning is never a waste, obviously. But if you want to do that, it's like 40 hours of it over there probably. So have fun.
An evolutionary biologist, not an American talk show host. And he enumerated 5 major explanatory deficits of neo-Darwinism, many of them surrounding this problem that the mechanism lacks the generative or creative power necessary to account for the major.
Also, this is the problem with like the media, that the media will have people on like this who just straight up lies. They'll have just straight up liars and frauds on there. And they don't know. Piers Morgan doesn't know enough about evolution to know why this guy is wrong or lying. He doesn't know that. So this is not an exercise in journalistic integrity. This is Piers Morgan uncensored. I don't know who is supposed to be censoring him in the first place. He's had a number of TV shows on like major national news. He's been a journalist for like what, 30, 40 years now. They got nobody censoring him anyway. But like this is him just like bringing people on that I guess he thinks are being treated unfairly or something like that, and just lets them talk. Just lets them talk about whatever. And I don't have a problem with somebody like Stephen Meyer being brought on a TV show. I really don't. If Stephen Meyer wants to come on a TV show, I think that's fine. But there should be another person, an expert in these things, there to check him on what he's saying, because Piers Morgan can't. This is not uncensored. This is a lack of journalistic integrity.
Innovations in the history of life.
Well, your best-selling book, new book, Return of the God Hypothesis, you argue there are three big scientific discoveries that point to the existence of God. I want to go through these. One, the Big Bang Theory. So why would that lend support to a theory of a God? Or
Well,
God?
right. Maybe just a little framing before I dive into the evidence. Professor Dawkins at Oxford has said that the universe has precisely the properties that we should expect if at bottom there is no purpose, no design, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. And though I'm on the opposite side,
And he's right about that. I mean, the universe looks like you would expect it to if there is no God. If there is a God, that makes our universe and its workings entirely more perplexing than it already is.
side of this science v. God issue with the good professor, I think he does a marvelous job of framing key issues. And this is one of those great framing quotations. Because what he's saying is that whether we think of it as a scientific question or a philosophical question or both, if we have a hypothesis about reality, the way we test that is by looking at the world around us and seeing if what we see comports with what we would expect to see if our hypothesis were true. And his hypothesis is that of blind, pitiless indifference, which is a shorthand way of saying that everything came about by strictly undirected material processes. And what the materialists expected coming into the early 20th century was evidence of an eternal, self-existent universe, one that had been here for an infinitely long time and therefore did not need an external creator. What in
Okay, that is not what that would be. Like they always say this, like that scientists were using the idea of an eternal universe to disprove God or something. But like that is not what the point of that was. It was what the best evidence they had showed that the universe seemed to be eternal. They were wrong about that. It wasn't fundamentalist Christians who just like was like, look at this. We're like, look at this Bible here. This Bible has the real truth. No, it was other scientists who discovered the reality that the Big Bang happened, that cosmic inflation was a thing. That was scientists. That was not Bible believing, Bible thumping Baptist preachers out in the middle of nowhere.
fact the astrophysicists, the cosmologists, the astronomers found was evidence of a universe that had a definite beginning, and therefore one that could not have created itself, because before the matter of the universe came into existence, there was no matter there to do the causing. And so the picture of the universe that has emerged starting from the 1920s all the way to the present, both from observational astronomy and from theoretical physics, is a universe that had a definite beginning and therefore requires some sort of external creator or cause.
Again,
Wow, that's wild. So I bet that means that most astrophysicists are now Christians or believe in God, right? Well, no. The people who discovered the Big Bang and the people who study it for a living and things like it, study the universe for a living, are the least likely to be religious. They are the least likely to interpret the evidence in the same way that he does. That should be really telling. Now, that isn't solid proof of anything, to be sure, but I think that is pretty telling that the people who know the most about the universe and its workings are the least likely to buy his story.
and let me just very briefly highlight this point because it is so crucial. The more that science has understood the origin of the universe, the more clear it has become that the universe is not eternal into the past, but in fact had a definite beginning at a particular point in time. This idea of the singularity, that the universe itself had a beginning, that space-time is a continuum. Space, time, and matter all began, and that raises a very significant philosophical question, because in order for it to be
I just want to say, this guy's really stubby thumbs bother me. This guy has toe thumbs, man. I can't, whenever he's talking, there's two things I always focus on. I always focus on that near walrus mustache of his that he's not going all the way with it. He needs to go full walrus or just shave that thing off. And then it's those stubby little like thumbs. I mean, they're not normal looking thumbs. They're like toes. It's like he's got a big toe on each hand. He can't help that, of course. I'm not saying like that it makes him a degenerate or something like that, but it's hard for me to focus when I'm just seeing like a toe on his hand moving back and forth while he speaks in walrus.
Be a scientific question. It has to be observable. How do you observe the beginning of the universe? No one will ever be able to. This is not repeatable. This is not observable. This is.
Look at that thing. Look at that. Look at that. Isn't that? I mean, that's a. Look at that. I don't. It's his is so much. It's like a toe. It's really like somebody just cut off his thumb and put a toe there.
Is all looking back into the past history of the universe to make what then becomes a philosophical assessment about, well, if the universe began, then what began it, or how did it begin?
Dawkins.
And you know, the people who do that assessment, scientists, they don't buy what you're selling, Daily Dose. So I don't know what you want. It's people who already believe in God that insert God into that picture, but people who believe in God and then find out about this, they are less likely to believe in God after finding out about the Big Bang and how it works. It's very curious, isn't it? It's almost like the less you understand about the universe, the more inclined you are to turn to religion. Usually, not always, usually.
Dawkins is obviously one of the world's most famous atheists. Are you a believer in God yourself?
I do believe in God, yes.
Okay, so let's.
Bro, he wrote a whole book about how good it is that the world is turning back to Jesus, which, by the way, is not happening. Let's be clear about one thing here. Christianity, over the last 30 years in America, has hemorrhaged more people than it gained in all three Great Awakenings combined. I mean, the Great Awakenings were enormous events in American history that changed the whole course of the nation. And as a percentage of the population, more people have fallen away from Christianity and started identifying as non-religious or atheist or agnostic than all of the Great Awakenings combined. I mean, think about how big Billy Graham was alone. And he was probably just like, was he even the biggest of the Great Awakenings? I think the first one was pretty big, but all of those combined, still less than the number of people that have left. The tide is not turning back towards Jesus. Some people who don't like trans people, queer people, feminism, black people asking for rights, stuff like that, people who are still reactionary, people who left God behind because they felt like God infringed upon their rights, but they now feel like trans people are by requesting to be called she and her and stuff like that. Those people are going back to religion in a lot of cases now. And that's their problem. But there aren't enough of them to make it like a sea change in society. Now, these things ebb and flow, so it could be the case that the number of unbelievers is decreasing currently. But the evidence for that conclusion is really thin indeed in America and completely non-existent in like the UK and Canada and Australia and Europe. I mean, there's just no evidence for this hypothesis. It's all wishful thinking.
Let's play a clip from Dawkins on this show.
Yes.
So why is it not possible that there is a superior being, power, which many people believe in different ways?
It's possible there are
different
fairies
types
at the
of
bottom
God.
of the garden. I mean, all sorts of things are possible. You can't deny that.
Well, except I've never seen fairies at the end of the garden, have you?
No, you've never seen God either.
No, but you don't know for sure that either doesn't exist.
No, I don't know that fairies don't exist. Fairies may be leprechauns.
Notice that like Piers Morgan was way, way harsher on Dawkins than he has been on Stephen Meyer. That's because Piers Morgan agrees with Stephen Meyer. He's a reactionary. This isn't uncensored. It's him not knowing enough to talk about the subject at hand. And in this case, when it comes to religion, he knows just enough to feel slighted by what Richard is saying here.
For all I know.
So not genuine. Ugh. It makes your skin crawl, doesn't it?
You know, my big question for all atheists, well, is okay, you don't believe in God, but what was there before the Big Bang? Before
I don't know, and I don't know that there was a before the Big Bang exactly. I mean, if it's the case that causality as we see it in our universe originated at the moment of the Big Bang, then it is not a given that there was anything before the Big Bang as such. On the other hand, there are books like Lawrence Krauss, A Universe from Nothing, that argue that nothing, as we conceive of it, literal nothingness, does not exist, that there would always be quantum fields and stuff like that, that nothingness isn't a real thing. So A Universe from Nothing could answer that question. I have yet to actually finish it because I'm a lazy motherfucker. But anyway, what I'm getting at here is just this. I don't have to know. I don't have to know any of that stuff. I don't have to answer all these questions. And on top of that, Christians, if you're listening, the fact that you think you have an answer doesn't mean you actually have an answer. I could make up an explanation for what came before the Big Bang. That doesn't make it true. It's an explanation, but how true is it? Well, unless we can prove it, it's not very. So that's all we got to say. We got to say, we don't know. We don't know what happened before. If there was a before, we don't know. We don't have the answers. It's the people who are religious that are saying, we have the answers, that have to provide some proof for what happened before that point, if there was a before that.
before this all started? In other words, what was there before supposedly nothing? What is nothing? Nothing to me seems to be a totally incongruous word. What is nothingness?
Read A Universe from Nothing by Lawrence Krauss. Please, read another book. This is all I ever ask of Christians. Read another book. That's all you have to do. It's that simple.
And if you can't explain it, to me, and I believe in God, but to me, it suggests there must be a power bigger than the human mind.
Well, I think the Big Bang alone is a lot more powerful than the human mind. I think the universe as it exists now is a lot more powerful than the human mind. And besides that, what you want to believe about the universe doesn't make it so. The universe doesn't care what you believe about it. Why do you believe in God? Do you have so much as a single iota of evidence for that? Well, no, you don't. That's a problem.
The start of all this that was able to comprehend what may have happened, because we can't.
Right. Dawkins wants to portray theistic belief as if it's equivalent to belief in fairies. And
it is. It literally is.
And he'll concede that, well, it's possible. But I
mean, fairies existed to explain something that people didn't understand or didn't have answers to. God exists for the same purpose. We don't have answers for what came before the Big Bang. Therefore, fairies, right? That's how that works. I mean, in this case, it's God, not fairies, but fairies. It's fairies all the way down, right?
I think there's a stronger argument for the theistic case. And that is that when scientists and philosophers reason from
you could make a decent argument in favor of a deist God who just creates the universe and then bounces. But you can't really make a solid case for a theist God that actively intervenes in the universe because we see no evidence of that. None whatsoever. None, nothing. Not one bit. None.
Evidence. They typically use a method of reasoning that has a technical name. It's called inferring to the best explanation, where the best explanation is one where you're...
God doesn't actually explain anything is the thing. It doesn't have any explanatory power to say, magic sky, man, go boom. That doesn't explain anything.
Invoking a cause which has the kind of powers that would be required to explain the phenomenon of interest. And you correctly pointed out in your conversation with him that when you get back to that, what physicists often call the singularity, the point where matter, space, time, and energy begin to exist, the materialist is really up against a huge conundrum, because prior to the origin of matter, there is no matter to do the causing. That's what we mean by the origin of matter, that's where it starts.
Right.
And so if you want to invoke a cause which is sufficient to explain the origin of matter, you can't invoke matter. It's in principle, the materialistic explanations are in principle insufficient. So you need to...
I already explained this pretty well, I like to think, and I agree with Daily Dose. This is your friendly reminder to subscribe, and like, and comment, if you would be so kind.
You invoke something which is external to the material universe and is not bounded by time and space as well.
If you are talking about something immaterial, timeless, and spaceless, you are describing nothing. If you also describe it as, what's the word, omniscient, that sort of thing, then you're just adding characteristics to nothingness. You're still describing nothing. It's just, in fact, that is a more powerful idea, isn't it? What's more powerful than a God that exists creating the universe than a God that doesn't exist creating the universe? It seems to be what he's describing, doesn't it?
And that starts to paint a picture of the kind of cause you would need that has the sort of attributes the traditional theists have traditionally associated with God. God is a timeless, God is outside of time and space, has causal powers, is an agent with volition, and therefore can initiate a change of state from, in this case, nothing to something.
And do you believe that
This is just like more of the theologian sort of advanced cope, really. That's all this is. It's just, I want to believe in God, and you can't stop me, because I'm just going to use words that I'm using the wrong way, probably, to make my case. Like, this is just advanced cope. That's all that is.
God?
I can already anticipate in the comment section of this video that there's going to be atheists racing to the keyboard to type that there isn't any evidence for this God. So therefore, God is just like believing in the flying spaghetti monster, a unicorn, a fairy, whatever. But may I just suggest that when you're asking for material evidence of an immaterial God, it's like asking for evidence of a three-dimensional object within a two-dimensional plane. And I've
The thumbs, man. The thumbs.
tried to lay that out in the short form video. I'm going to unpack that a little bit more in this video, where if you begin a priori with the assumption that the only type of reality that exists is material reality, then obviously if you're asking for material evidence of an immaterial God, you can say that there is no such evidence. But
I like how Daily Dose always cuts in to add literally nothing to the discussion. The guy has a talent, doesn't he? The guy has a real talent. See, our assumption that the material universe is the only thing that there is based on the fact that that's all we can see evidence for. That if there's no evidence for something, then there's no reason to even imagine that something exists. There's no evidence for anything supernatural. That's a big problem. How are you going to say, well, the supernatural exists, if there's no evidence for it? If it exists, there should be something. It should interact with the universe in some detectable way, even if it's acting from outside the universe.
problem is that the universe, the matter, the material itself did come into existence at a point in the past, which raises the question, where did matter itself come from? And it opens up a window to another mode of reality, an immaterial mode of reality, what some have called the mind of God, which is the impetus for both the universal constants, things like gravity and the speed of light, that are these fixed principles that the rest of the matter and space and time within the universe operate by. But when you look at fixed mathematical truths, those things also point back to a mind. And like Dr.
It's a catchy little dance, isn't it?
Meyer said, mind is capable of creation. Raw mathematical truths themselves don't actually have a creative apparatus. Matter itself does not have a creative apparatus. Mind does have a creative apparatus. Now, there's a separate video that I've made on this channel that really focuses.
Okay, I think we've heard all we need to hear from Daily Dose of making things more complicated than they have to be. Isn't the point of like cutting in to clarify something? But every time he cuts in, he makes it more difficult to understand. That's the wrong way to be doing this, Daily Dose. Your goal should not be to make things even harder to understand. Your goal should be to make things easier to understand. Who is your audience? Your audience is like bottom barrel fundamentalist Christians. Young Earth Creationists here. Your audience is not people like me who know things. So anyway, to the rest of you, thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. And I hope you have a great one.